Thank you, Maddie. I'm just going to share my screen to get the presentation up. So bear with me a second. Just let me know if you can all see that okay. I'm just going to make it bigger and is it? Can everyone see that all right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining. Yeah, we thought we would, well, the reason why we chose, I think, this topic, I think with everything kind of going on in the digital world at the minute, I think everything that we kind of talked about, wasn't it, Joe? You know, AI and social media, everything that we talked about relating to kind of copywriting and content, all kind of related to trust. And we thought it would be nice to just kind of bring it back to basics and talk about why that is so important for copywriting for law firms, and how you can build trust through some simple strategies. So I'll just quickly run you through the agenda for what we're going for the conversation. So we're just going to start off by just talking about trust, kind of what it is, why it is so important in general, and then specifically for the legal sector. And we'll just talk about then the first step of kind of building that trust, which is, you know, identifying your audience, understanding your audience, and then, you know, how you can kind of connect and engage with them. We're going to talk about credibility, how to do that through your content, transparency, again, a really key component to building trust. Then we're going to talk about copywriting best practices. We're going to talk about formatting, user experience, SEO, AI, and we're also going to kind of we're going to show you some content that we think is maybe that could be improved, and kind of walk you through what we would do to kind of really to allow trust to come through a lot more. And then we're going to just do some key takeaways and questions. But yeah, as you said, if anyone has any questions throughout while we're talking, please just raise a hand or leave a comment, and we'll answer them then. Cool. Well, trust, why is it important for law firms? So obviously trust is just, it's a crucial component of any relationship, whether that is personal or professional. It's essentially the foundation that any relationship is built upon. And I think in the legal sector, it's specifically important because a lot of people are coming to law firms to essentially put very sensitive matters in their hands, and it's extremely important for them to trust the people that are dealing with those sorts of situations. So, you know, we talk about the core drivers of trust, which is authenticity. You know, when someone trusts that they believe that they're interacting with the real you. Logic, when they feel that you're kind of competent and you know what you're talking about. And empathy, when they feel like you understand their needs and their pain points. So if we're talking about those, those three pillars of trust, of course, we can kind of relate that to everything in the legal industry, and especially when it comes to content, there's just certain things that you can do to hit those points. And in terms of, what trust can do, it's about taking those short-term connections and making them long-term, whether that's, someone visiting your site and turning that into them jumping on the site and then leaving straight away to them through and then, calling the office, or whether it's a client who comes to you for, one service versus a client coming to you for that service and then continuing to come back for later matters within their life. Trust is what will kind of really influence that, and that's why it's so important to have. And to kind of end that slide is just to say that, the first step to build that trust is often through the content on your website. So that's what we're going to be talking about today.
And it is essentially, it comes back to the idea that trust kind of acts as a building block on which we kind of establish and nurture meaningful relationships. Because the reality is, if you want a long-term relationship with a client, you're going to be in each other's lives for a good period of time. So it's not necessarily about building a really close personal relationship, but it's having those sort of the groundwork essentially for a relationship moving forwards.
Yeah, definitely. So understanding your audience, that's essentially the first step, I think, in kind of building trust. All of the content that you write should ultimately be completely audience-centric. Just be thinking exactly about what your readers want when they get on that page. And again, it will link to kind of SEO, which we'll talk about later, but what you want to essentially be answering the questions that you think your audience will have. You want to be giving them solutions to the issues you also think they have. So think about, what do they know? What do they need to know? What level of understanding do they already have when they're coming to your website and the content you're putting out there? I think one of the kind of probably the big kind of mistakes that a lot of firms make is they will create content that's directed towards an audience with a high level knowledge of the legal sector and the legal process. Just simple things, like the difference between the Crown and the Magistrates' Court. For if you're in the legal industry, that will obviously be second nature to you. You'll know the difference, but to the everyday person, that might be something that they are not clear on. So it's just about making sure that you're breaking down those terms, you're giving explanations, you're providing them with that extra content, just so that it is accessible to them and they don't feel left out in any way. So yeah, it's just making sure that all the content that you're writing is targeted towards the right people.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to that, the basic concept of your website is to sell your services, essentially. That's what you're aiming to do. You need to attract more clients. And only by taking those steps to understand your audience and how you want them to interact with your content, that's the only way you can then essentially sell the service.
Yeah, and it's also, we'll come into it later when we're talking about tapping into pain points and and really understanding their needs. But I think the main thing about creating content that's that your audience can engage with is making sure that it's that you're just adding value to them. You're providing them with content that's clear, that they that is going to enrich them, that is going to break down complex ideas or processes, and then it's kind of providing them with resources, providing them with an easy reading experience that they're going to enjoy, and it's not going to take extra work for them to kind of get through a page. So it's just about what you can offer them, and hand in hand with that is making sure that you have that, you have a tone of voice that you've established. Your kind of business value should really come across through that tone of voice, and it should be consistent across all the content that you're putting out there, whether it is blogs, white papers, or even social media posts. Trust is something that's built over long term, and I think as long as you've got that consistent tone of voice and it's spread across all of the content that you put out there, that's going to really add value to your audience.
Yeah, but the sort of the big but, and I guess the caveat to that is the fact that you always need to be ready to adapt, because I think everyone will be aware that your target audience might change over time, your business priorities might change. The type of client that you want to attract might sort of be different depending on how much work you're generating, things like that. So while you need to remain consistent in the work you're delivering, you also need to be agile and ready to adapt the tone of voice you're using, for example. So this is something that it's always worth regularly assessing and tweaking, rather than just having one set template and just using that for months and months and generating loads of content. It's something that you can continue to adjust.
And you can also kind of do that based on feedback you get from your clients as well. If you are someone, that can offer kind of surveys or any kind of digital feedback, that's something that you can always take on board and then adapt, a tone of voice from that, which is always just a good way, I think, to keep in tune with how the world is changing, the needs of people are going to change. So I suppose, connecting with your audience. So once you've kind of understood and identified who they are and what they want, it's how you can really connect with them. So it's just all about bridging that gap between understanding and connecting, and finding out what it is that's really going to take it that extra step. and what's going to allow them to really want to pursue a kind of relationship with you and your services. And, you know, only by connecting with your audience can you really continue to evolve your content over time. I think like one of the main things that a lot of law firms ask is kind of how we can really make our content different from all of our competitors. Obviously, a lot of law firms are offering very similar services, and a lot of the content has to be very similar because essentially it's setting out just you know, legal terms and processes that just are how they are, and they need to be kind of put on the internet. But what you can really do to kind of connect with your audience is just make sure that you're going that extra mile to provide them extra value, that you've got a really strong tone of voice, and that you're just really letting that kind of human element shine through all of the content that you're doing. So I think, yeah, that's what can really make you stand out, is that you're really, you know, sure of who you are and what your values are as a business, and then you allow that to reflect through your copywriting.
Yeah, and that's something we hear quite often from clients that we might start working with for the first time. When I'm speaking to them and asking them how they want to come across through copy, one of the first things that usually is said is, oh, we're people, you know, we're people just like our clients, and we want to actually reflect that. It's easier than you think to do that. You just need to consider what your audience would want from you, and then actually putting that down on paper. It's not really any sort of hidden trick to doing that. It's about reflecting the personality that your firm has that other firms, or specifically your competitors, might not necessarily have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's also that you know, through your copywriting, you want to show your audience that you're there to build a lasting connection. You know, as we said, you know, the difference between those short-term connections and long-term connections, that's really where trust kind of fits in. And you just need to show them that you're there to support them from all angles, that you're there from, you know, the first step to the last step. Because again, I think trust is something that is built over time. It's not something we can do overnight, you know, with a couple of new blog posts. It needs to be something that's built consistently. And I think it also has to come from all areas of the business. It needs to come from the solicitors, the marketing team, everyone involved, not just kind of the person that's putting those words on the page. I think that it just really needs to come from the core, and then it will, in effect, show itself through the writing.
Yeah. And I mean, the sort of underlying thing is people are quite needy. We're all quite needy, and we all need to be reassured. So when your audience is actually reading what you've put onto your website, they need to be certain that when they make the decision to pick up the phone or to fill in an inquiry form, that has been built from everything they've read before, and they've been able to come to a logical decision to say, okay, these people, I trust them to answer whatever query I might have. So it's, again, it's built up over time. It's not simply a case of one page is going to be the magic page and you're going to get 5,000 inquiries from that one page, but it's building up. It's a process essentially that you need to develop over time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how to connect and engage? We've kind of covered a lot of these, so I won't repeat too much, but yeah, I think the main point is addressing pain points, fears, needs, hopes. So essentially with kind of all legal content, I think one of the best things to do is to first start with what your reader is struggling with. What is it that your services are going to solve? And as soon as you kind of address that, it will instantly allow the audience to kind of to connect with what you're writing. And then kind of following on from that then is where your services come in as the kind of solution, and you're showing them how you can benefit or solve these problems.
Yeah, and that also kind of breaks down that potential disconnect that people might feel especially if they've never had to deal with a solicitor directly before, that it's quite an intimidating process potentially. So by actually addressing how they're likely to feel, they might then be reassured to think, okay, they understand what I'm going through, and therefore they're able to actually to help me. So that, like an obvious example would be like family law, for example, because we talk about family law and it's quite a sensitive matter and it's likely to be quite emotional. These sorts of things that if you can weave that into your copy, someone might then think, okay, I trust this firm over other firms to then pick up the phone.
And also I think it's important to show through your writing that you understand, you know, their struggles towards, or the kind of maybe how stressed they might be feeling about the thought of the legal process, just, you know, for navigating it in general. I think we have to just show that we're just very sympathetic, that this isn't a process that many people have probably been through before. It's something it's completely new to them. So it's about, you know, sympathizing with their actual legal challenges, and then sympathizing with, you know, the journey they're going to have to go on. So it's all about then, you know, showing that you're there to kind of break that process down for them. You're there to guide them step by step. And that kind of comes hand in hand with, again, breaking down those kind of complex terms and ideas into kind of really digestible and accessible content. And again, I think, so transparency is something we will talk a little bit more about later on, but just being as honest as you can. Transparency is something that really builds trust. And if you can just, you know, manage your readers' expectations, that's going to pay off a lot more in the long run. And advocacy, you know, be an advocate. Your clients should never be treated as ordinary. Through your writing, you want to, you know, show them how much you are kind of, what am I trying to say? That, you know, you want them to succeed. You need to show how kind of passionate you are about solving them, you know, solving their issues. And again, that's kind of all about just putting them at the center of the content. Because, you know, the minute you do that, the other things will start to kind of work out. So, yeah. So credibility and expertise. So this is just, you know, one way that you can really build trust, and that's just through simple things like spelling, grammar, and language. Paying attention to the basics might seem really straightforward, but it's so important for anyone that's putting content in the world, especially in the legal sector, to get these things right. Something that me and Joe always say is kind of, you know, when you take care of those small things, the bigger things will take care of themselves. That is also something that David always says. But it's, you know, it's true, and you just need to be really careful. Something small like that could really turn someone off, and they will go straight to a competitor. So it's extremely important just to spend that extra time making sure you get those things right, because it shouldn't take a lot of effort.
It makes a huge difference, and it's really can be something as simple as one typo or one sort of errant full stop that would make someone subconsciously question what they're reading, and then obviously tying back into the trust thing. So, for example, if you were reading something from what you thought was a credible source, say they were top of a search result, and within the first paragraph there's a typo, you immediately take a step back and you think, oh, okay, am I trusting everything that I'm reading here? And then you immediately might think, okay, not going to continue reading this, and you back off and you look for something else. So that's just such a tiny error that can have massive repercussions potentially. So taking care of things at the micro level and having really close attention to detail, it cannot be underestimated how important that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it kind of in hand with that as well, I think, is showing your expertise firsthand. So including case studies wherever you can, I think, is a huge way to really connect with your audience and build trust. Showing them, you know, firsthand how you have solved similar cases, or you've supported people in a similar position. I think we are probably all the same in that we kind of rely on reviews and case studies to make decisions ourselves. So for the legal sector, this is, you know, even more important. So wherever you can kind of weave that in within your content, whether it's kind of at a separate section at the end of the page, or whether you're just weaving it into the kind of main body of the text, it's a really good way to just, you know, back up everything that you are saying and how you're selling your services. And again, I think resources, in addition to that, so providing your reader with all of the information they need. And if that's something you can do within the content, if it's a simple term and it won't take up too much space and it's relevant to your page, including it where you can, if it's just a simple definition, or if it's something that you think they might need to know or they might need a further explanation on, but you don't necessarily think it's relevant to that page, provide them with an internal link to take them to another page on your website, which is going to see which Google likes, because it's allowing them to crawl your site easier, but it's also just, you know, you're showing your audience that you are willing to let them leave that page if it's going to benefit them. And again, that's the same for external linking as well. So sending them out to maybe government websites, or just to kind of solid resources that they would need that they're not able to access on your site. And one thing I think is good to remember is, you know, we often think, do we want to provide a link outside of our content to another website? But if your content has kind of really complex language that your readers aren't going to understand, they're going to go and Google it anyway. So you're better off providing them with that solid resource rather than just getting them to, you know, find out the answer themselves. And no one wants that kind of difficult reading experience. It should all be there for them.
And I mean, if you're providing enough value on the page itself, an external link, provided it goes to somewhere, you know, viable and useful, it would never be an issue really, and you wouldn't expect someone to then never come back to the page that they were already on.
Yeah, and I mean, again, that kind of first-hand experience. So mentioning any awards or accreditations where you can, people love that. They love to see, and it's always great, you know, when you've got kind of a lot of competitors, to just make sure that you're showing your readers, you know, this is why we do what we do. This is, you know, we're renowned for this, and this. Show that firsthand in your content. You can put that kind of towards kind of anywhere within the content. It can be in the introduction when you're kind of just introducing what, you know, the family team, for example, saying we have family law accreditation or things like that, or it can be towards the CTA or even on the side of the page. Just having those kind of those mentions in there can really build trust through your readers. And again, expertise of individuals, so focusing on kind of maybe specific teams or solicitors that have experience in dealing with really similar cases. Again, I think that just goes back to that, you know, the 3 pillars of trust, and one of them is authenticity, and just showing, you know, really letting that human element shine through, and allowing readers to kind of put a face to the content that's on the page as well. So the need for transparency. So as we kind of touched upon before, transparency is extremely important when it comes to building trust. You know, nowadays it's easier than ever to see through the cracks, and people are clever. People aren't deceived easily. So there's absolutely no point in trying to not be transparent. And, you know, ways you can do this is just being really open and honest as you can with kind of pricing. Can you include pricing information? Do you charge for client meetings? Is legal aid something you offer? If it is, please put that in the content, or we would recommend doing that. And if there's any kind of, if there's any barriers to any certain audiences, I think it's best to make that clear as early on as you possibly can.
I think with pricing specifically, I think there is sometimes a hesitation to include pricing information, especially if, you know, you might, for example, charge for client meetings rather than doing a free initial meeting.
I'm guessing that $4,000 we've asked for includes counsel.
Okay. So for example, that might be something people hesitate with, but it kind of ties into an argument about quantity versus quality. So you may well, if you don't mention necessarily a charged meeting, you might get a large number of inquiries come in, but they might be not very worthwhile. They might not lead to anything. But if you include information about a charged meeting, you may only get 5 or 6 inquiries come in, but they may all be quality leads that you can actually use. So by taking the time to be transparent, open, clear, you know, the results in the long term will then come through.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think just being transparent is one of the easiest ways to build trust as well. And that's something you can do through your copywriting. in a number of ways.
Yeah. And it kind of, yeah, you can't always promise the world, and you can't always suggest you're going to, you know, solve every single possible issue, and it's going to be, you know, you're going to deliver all these promises, but that's not necessarily exactly what you want to do if you want to build a sort of stable level of trust with the clients that you want to work with.
Okay. So in terms of kind of best practices of how you can really kind of build and show trust through your copywriting, a few of these were kind of touched upon, but the main one really is just that clear and concise messaging. I think the most impressive thing a law firm can do is to kind of make that complex ideas and complex terms accessible to the everyday person. So if you can do that through your content, people are going to keep coming back because you're tapping into a wide range of audiences. And of course, there's, you know, I suppose the thing to consider there is also if you do have a really specific audience where it's someone that, you know, generally does have a much higher level of knowledge, then of course you can adapt your tone of voice there. But essentially, you just want to make sure you're avoiding fluffy sentences, technical jargon, and just making it as digestible as it can. I think a lot of the time as well, you have to consider what is that person going to the page for. If it's a really kind of complex, sensitive issue, they want that content on the page to be as accessible as possible. They do not want to have to be going out that page and Googling terms. So yeah, that's the most important thing, I think.
I think that also ties quite well back into that idea of understanding and connecting with your audience, because only by doing that will you know how much information you need to provide on a page and how much information you expect your audience to understand. Because we appreciate that there will be some services where you might be targeting a very specific audience that you would expect to have a sort of foundation level of understanding, and you don't want to alienate them by then doing lengthy explanations on certain terms that they would already understand. So again, by taking that time to really understand the audience, that pays off when it comes to the technical aspects of putting the page together.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, so when you're using headings, you know, utilizing H1s, H2s, H3s, we'll kind of touch more upon this in the kind of SEO section, but you essentially just want to make sure that those headings are, you know, answering the questions that your audience wants. If it's a page on something, for example, like elastic power of attorney, that, you know, the heading should be clear that that page is going to give you a breakdown of that and how your services can help. And you kind of want to structure them in a way that's just, you're thinking about their thought process. And again, this will come back to the kind of customer journey, what their intentions are, what their needs are, but you just need to be putting yourself in their shoes and thinking, what question do I want answered after reading that paragraph? And again, making them consistent. Ideally, you kind of want to keep them as short as you possibly can, and including the keywords where possible as well. But as I said, we'll kind of go into a bit more detail on that afterwards. But again, storytelling, you know, you just want to keep, and I know we're saying it so much, but just really keeping that human element at the forefront of all the content you write. People like intimacy, they like connection, they like to feel that they're talking to real people. And I think storytelling can really help you do that. And it's a really simple kind of strategy you can add into your copywriting, which will just allow you to build that trust just that little bit more. And pace, again, that's something you can do with just with your sentence structures. It's about making sure you've got the right balance. You're not you're not having really long waffly sentences, but again, it's not kind of all broken up into tiny little sentences. There needs to be a really great balance. And you can also kind of increase pace where you need it, where you want more sentences to kind of create more of an impact. You can make them shorter. There's loads of things you can do, but it's just mostly about having variation. And that's something that can just add to a much more pleasant reading experience.
Yeah. And with that, it's kind of dictating where you want your audience to reach on a page, because as and frustrating as this to admit, but as copywriters, we know that when we produce a page that says 1,500 words, we're not necessarily expecting the reader to read every single word of that. But by sort of editing the pace at which you want the reader to read through, you can kind of direct them to the points at which the important points of the page, which would be a call to action where they would, then take an action, pick up the phone, fill in an inquiry form, etc.
Yeah. And sort of following on from that is, just really taking time to craft your call to actions, your CTAs. First of all, I think it's really important to just remember that you don't want to scare your reader. And I think a lot of the time, that can happen because a lot of, CTAs can tend to be sort of, call us today or call us now. And a lot of the time we just want that, call to action to be just really accessible and low commitment. We don't want it to be something that turns away the reader. We want them to feel that this is going to be an easy step for them. It shouldn't be stressful. It should just be that, we're here to offer our services, and we're kind of able to do that in whatever way you're comfortable with. So whether you're able to offer video calls or emails, an inquiry form, whatever you can offer, I think giving as many options as you possibly can and communicating it in a way that shows that it's kind of, whatever kind of works for your audience. And again, it's also about how you distribute those CTAs throughout your content, how many you're including. Ideally, kind of not really wanting to go more than 2 CTAs. If you've got a sort of 1,000 word piece of content, but it really depends. And the best way to do it is just read through the content and see, does that really stand out? Does it really look like we're being pushed towards a sale? If it does, then take them out and just try and incorporate them a little bit more, naturally.
Yeah. And also don't be afraid to sort of check through other websites that you like the look of, or you think they are writing content in the sort of manner you would like to write content, and take inspiration from that. Obviously, don't copy it word for word because that would be a disaster, but it's just about using that as an inspiration to then build from. And call to action is a great example for doing that, because you can sort of see, assess the kind of language they're using, and if that's along the lines of what you would like to do, or that kind of represents that, you can then use that as inspiration for your own pages.
Yeah, and thinking about, when you receive, even whether it's like email marketing, what do you click on? What really, what engages you? What would you be happy to kind of to accept as something that you'd want to do? I think, what doesn't scare you. So it's and you can always, like, I think a good tip is what I always used to do was when I used to have email marketing and I liked the CTAs and it was something that I wanted to engage with, I would just save them in a folder, because it can give you some good ideas of just wording you can use that's accessible. But yeah, it's just all about putting yourself in the shoes of that person that's, searching that query online and thinking about what's going to be, accessible to them.
Yeah.
And obviously, and we'll kind of go on to talk about this more, but SEO is hugely important when it comes to trust. It just goes hand in hand with content. Search engine optimization is obviously the definition of it, but it's I'll just quickly go on to the next page because no, it's not here, but SEO is essentially what is allowing your content to kind of come up higher on the page when people are searching for products and services on Google, or in any search engine. So SEO is important because it allows people to find your content based on their real needs and their kind of organic searches. So you're able then to create content that's going to respond to what they really need. And there's so many kind of specific things we can talk about with SEO, but we will do a little bit later. But yes, I'll just go over. So formatting and user experience, again, just comes hand in hand with copywriting. So obviously just kind of really simple things like paragraph and sentence lengths. So just keeping the paragraphs kind of as short as you can, really. As we all know, no one really kind of likes to sift through a really long bulk of text. So keeping that broken up as much as you can. Sentence length, again, just making sure there's variation, just essentially making it really easy and accessible for people to read. And using bulleted and numbered lists where you can. I think this is a really good tip as well for when you're kind of looking at your competitors and thinking about what you can do to really kind of get ahead of them or just do that a little bit more. And I think it's looking at any content that they maybe have put into a paragraph that you think could be broken down into a list. If it can, then your reader is probably going to like that a lot more, because essentially it's just making it easier for them to digest. And again, consistency in headings and subheadings. So just making sure that, you haven't got one that's sort of 3 words and one that's like 11 words long. It's going to look strange on the page. So you're just thinking about what's really going to look nice and really kind of flow. And as we said, sort of consistency again comes back to just that building trust with making, when all of your pages are kind of consistent roughly in what they look like and how they can be read. It's something that people really like.
And it's again taking care of the minor details, right? So it's taking the time to look at spacing, things like that. And if it's consistent and it's the same across all pages, that can go a really long way. So again, it's micro level stuff, but these small changes, they make a huge difference in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. And again, like navigation is something that's really important. So when you're kind of writing your content, you could include a kind of just a navigation menu, which, someone can kind of click on point number 1 and it will take them to the first paragraph. Just a clear structure of what that page is going to be or do. I think that's really important as well when you're thinking about people going onto your page for the first time. A lot of people will just jump off pages automatically if they don't like the way it looks or they don't think it's going to answer the questions they have. So I think having structure, bullet points, key kind of takeaways or summary of what's going to come is a really good idea, I think, when it comes to especially kind of service pages and longer blogs.
It's often just about making things as easy as possible for a reader. You don't want them to have to work to find the information that they want. It should be easy enough for them, whether they're on a computer or on a phone, to be able to find the information they're looking for and then take the action they desire.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of comes to that then is alignment and spacing, making use of white space, being cautious of kind of spacing, line spacing, again, breaking up your paragraphs. You can use visual elements where you can. I know that's not something that we kind of tend to do so much in the legal sector because a lot of the time it's not really, maybe it's not relevant, but if you can and it kind of adds value to that content, then definitely do it, especially when it comes to breaking down data or things that maybe just don't really work as in kind of written form. And then lastly, then it's just about kind of joining up your marketing efforts. If you are repurposing content across, your blog, LinkedIn, Instagram, making sure that the formatting or the color scheme or the tone of voice is all consistent across all of those platforms, which again is just something that will create like familiarity, and that's something that will add to trust as well.
I'm just going to jump in here with a couple of questions we've had, if you don't mind.
Yes, of course.
So firstly, I don't know if this is true, and I don't know if you will know the answer, but apparently people only read the first 4 words of a sentence. Is that true? And what would you suggest to overcome an issue like that?
I don't know if the figure is true. I have to say I'm not 100% sure, but I've heard a very similar sentence before. And I think I completely believe it, though. I think, if you're looking at any content, whether it's an email, website, it's those first couple of seconds that count. And I think SEO really comes into it here because you really need to be incorporating those keywords in the first couple of sentences or definitely in the H1. That's why you would include your kind of key term within that H1, because the second that person goes on the page, the reason why they've gone to that page is because they've searched in that keyword or they've searched in a similar query. So as long as you're making sure that you're including that, then hopefully they should stay on the page because you're showing that you're satisfying that query.
Yeah, and shorter, snappier sentences beneficial, right? So if they're reading the first 4 words of a sentence and they can sort of gaze their eyes and see that sentence goes on, you know, for 2 or 3 lines, they might immediately think, I'm not going to be bothered to read that. So by having shorter sentences, I mean, I don't know whether there's some sort of psychology behind that, but that might mean, okay, I'll finish that sentence. Okay, I'm going to read the next sentence. Oh, I've read the first 2 paragraphs, and then it goes on from there. So I think it ties back into that idea of what we were saying about shorter, more to the point, punchier sentences can be much more beneficial.
Yeah, that's great. I think I agree as well. And then a second question, when you're writing copy and you've mentioned including visual elements, so the images, the infographics and the diagrams, are there any specific tools you've used to choose those images or create those infographics?
So we kind of at Conscious, we don't actually do many of the visuals or the infographics, but in previous jobs, I've used Canva, which is a really good way of, and Maddie, I know you've used this before. It's a really great tool for putting those things together for repurposing content. I have also heard, and I'm not sure what the specific ones are, but there's definitely tools now that can repurpose content for you, which is something that might be really interesting to look into. You know, if you have a blog post, you can give it that content and you can give it the color scheme and it will create infographics for you. I will try and find out what the names of those tools are for you to have a look at. And Maddie, maybe I'll send them to you on email so that you can distribute them. But yeah, Canva, I think. But I think the thing with images and infographics to remember is that whilst they are extremely helpful and can really add value to content, you just want to make sure that they really do have a place on that page and they're not just being used for any reason. You know, sometimes a stock image of someone sitting on a laptop is something that we can easily kind of add to the page, but is it really adding value? And I think that's probably the question you need to ask about every choice you're making on the page.
Yeah, perfect answer. I know Joanna, our head of digital PR, does use infographics when they've done research into a topic, for example. But I think, like you said, you wouldn't just have an infographic on a service page for no reason or in a blog post if it didn't add value or answer a question that the person is searching for the answer for on that page.
Definitely.
Thank you very much. That's all the questions we've got for this section. So yeah, you can move on now.
Okay, thank you. So SEO, I know I've sort of briefly mentioned it, but SEO, so in simple terms, SEO means making your website easier to find on the internet when people are looking for things like products and services. So, you know, when your website is more visible, it's likely that more people will visit your pages and you'll have a better chance of turning those readers into customers. So with SEO, the main thing is that content is king. I think in earlier days, it felt like SEO and content were kind of slightly head to head, but I think over the past couple of years, it's really, you know, become known that they really just go hand in hand. And content really is the most important aspect of SEO. Yeah,
I think that especially in previous years, there used to be quite cheap tactics that you could deploy to do sort of good SEO. So things like keyword stuffing, so having whatever your desired keyword, having that featured like 100 times on your page would make you like jump up the rankings. But the algorithms that the Google and other search engines use now mean that it's not so you can't really do that anymore. And it is about producing authentic and essentially authentic content that actually provides value. That's what's going to support your efforts with SEO.
Google is so smart now, it will spot if you are using those kind of those techniques. So all Google wants is for you to really show EEAT, so experience, expertise, authoritativeness and trustworthiness. I was dreading saying that word. I could never say authoritativeness. I'm not sure if that's how you say it, but that's basically what Google wants. It wants you to make sure that content on the page is really going to add value to your readers, and whether that's that's about, you know, clear and concise messaging, adding resources, clear CTAs, all of that adds to these kind of 4 elements. I think it's just really important that SEO should just never compromise the quality of your content. Keywords, which I will kind of explain in a minute, of course, they are extremely important and they're the most important part of SEO. but they should never come in the way of you creating that kind of really digestible, informative content. So yeah, avoiding kind of keyword stuffing, having tens of, loads and loads of mentions of keywords in your content is just going to come across unnatural, and people are going to start to become aware that you've kind of got almost an ulterior motive. It's not just to help them, you are really trying to get them to convert. So I think it's just so important to make sure that your writing is natural. And I think when when you've got a clear idea of what you want from that page, what your audience needs and what they're looking for and how your services can help, you'll find that you're naturally including those keywords as you write anyway, without having to kind of strategically put them in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think quite often it's people have the wrong mindset when they want to focus on SEO, as they start with SEO and they're thinking, okay, I've got these keywords and I'm going to put them down and I'm kind of going to build a page around that. Whereas that's really counterproductive. So you should always write the content you want to write. And then once you're finished, that's when you can then start to look at the elements you want to include in terms of improving the SEO profile of a page.
Yeah, and like another part of it as well is making sure that that content is original and unique. That's something that's really important for SEO. And one thing you can do to do this is one, making sure you have that really kind of strong tone of voice and the values of your law firm are coming through your content. But also that maybe you're looking at your competitors and you're seeing what they do well, and then you just have yourself, okay, but what can I do to make it just that little bit better? What can I answer that hasn't been answered on this page? So yeah.
I think we've got a question from
Laura.
I don't know if you want to come off mute, Laura.
Yes. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I would like to ask if you can recommend us where to look for these keywords after writing, like as you mentioned. To adjust our tests. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Laura. So we, to be honest, I think I probably need to check what I'm saying with our head of SEO, Jamie, because he's a lot more experienced than me. But with keywords, the way that we kind of do it at Conscious especially, and I think the majority of kind of SEO agencies would do this, but the keywords kind of come first. So you're looking at, you're using tools like Ahrefs to find the keywords first, and then you build the content around them. So it will basically show you that, the keywords people are searching, and then it will show you kind of follow-up questions. So you build your content around that. So it's kind of, when we say, you write the content and you think about the keywords next. So the first time of your content, you already have that main keyword. You build your content, your headers around that. And then the end, it's just where you think, okay, well, where can I actually fit in some more of these into the content? But Maddie, am I right in thinking do we have a Conscious Conversations on SEO as well?
We do. So just link in the chat if anyone wants to sign up. But yeah, in November, our head of SEO, Jamie, will be going into the difference between short tail and long tail keywords. As you can see, George has got on the slide how to do keyword research and the tools he uses to find keywords for our clients' content. And yeah, at Conscious, Jamie will always create a brief to give to the copywriters that includes the keywords from the research he has done before. Ahrefs, that somebody has asked, what is Ahrefs, please, that you mentioned. I'll put the link in the chat as well.
Yeah, so it's a keyword research tool, and it's not something that we use basically at all on the copywriting side. It's something that the SEO team use to create the briefs for us. So they'll do the keyword research for each page, and they'll kind of give us a group of, so we call them, so you can basically short tail or long tail, or you can sort of say your primary keyword or your head term, and then you have the long tail keywords or your kind of secondary keywords. So the kind of the head term is, the main keyword that you want to target for that page. So maybe it's divorce lawyers in Cardiff. So that's your kind of main keyword, and then your secondary keyword would be kind of variations of that. And through the keyword research, the SEO team would basically just think about kind of other questions that the audience might have based around that keyword, and then that's what would give us that list of secondary keywords. So then throughout our content, what we're doing is trying to build our H1s or H2s, our bullet points, the main body of the content around those keywords, and kind of answering those questions. But short tail keywords, just a very kind of rough explanation. Again, I'll leave it to Jamie because I don't want to give you any false information, but short tail keywords are essentially a lot shorter. They're harder to rank for typically. And then the long tail keywords are kind of usually a little bit longer in length. Sometimes they're kind of variations. They have a lot more filler words, and they're a little bit easier to rank for generally. So it just depends what your kind of goals are as to kind of which keywords you target. But yeah, hopefully the conscious conversations on SEO will be a lot more helpful there.
Yeah. Ahrefs as a tool, I think it gives information on how many people are searching for those keywords. It recommends you questions that people might also be searching with that keyword. So it kind of does half the research for you. And then the SEO team delve deeper and identify which keywords they think the clients could rank for based on their domain authority and things like that.
It also provides information on how competitive that keyword is, I think. So it might tell you, how many times it's searched per month, but also that it gives like a ranking score of how easy it would be to feature on the Google, top of Google essentially, if you're including that keyword. So it's a very, very detailed tool, and it has lots and lots of functions, many of which are beyond, again, my level of technical SEO expertise. But yeah, we're able to use the sort of, you don't really need to use everything that it offers you. There's a lot of sort of basic functions that are really useful.
Yeah, but Jamie will delve into this in a lot more detail in his session in November.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, just in terms, I suppose, of kind of how the keywords fit within, building trust within copywriting, you really just want to make sure that they're natural, that you're thinking about the quantity that you're using and, the placement of where they are. So, and that's something I think if you overstep that mark, that's essentially something that kind of can risk breaking trust slightly. So yeah, it's just something that's really important. And yeah, just the main message there, I think, is just to not ever let that kind of compromise the quality of your content. But in terms of linking, again, this is something that Jamie will go into a lot more detail about, but internal links, so internal linking to other pages on your website that will provide value to the person reading that page. So say, for example, you mentioned a pricing page, you want to kind of link that text and link it to a pricing document on your website, or if you're kind of referring to something on the gov.uk website, a term that maybe has been coined by someone, you can just highlight that link and send the link out. The only thing there to be careful of is obviously you don't want to send links to any competitors, and really you kind of want to keep the external links to a minimum. It's mainly just to kind of provide resources where you really have to. And again, it's just about making sure that your audience aren't going to feel the need to kind of Google terms. But yeah, I guess SEO loves that. Jamie will definitely be able to kind of answer a lot more questions on that. Word count. So word count is a bit of a funny one, I think. And I think people often ask sort of what is the ideal word count for content? And from my point of view, and Joe, I'm not sure if you agree, but it's just, it really depends on what the content is. Typically when you're thinking about a blog, you don't really want to go anywhere under 750. But it really depends. You just kind of need to look at your competitors, see what they're doing. And if you can add more value and that's going to increase the word count, then that's absolutely fine, as long as it's kind of adding, it's answering more questions.
Yeah, and equally don't get bogged down in trying to hit a certain word count. If you have provided all the information you need to provide and you find yourself stretching yourself too thin, or you think, the only way I'm going to be able to hit this word count is if I just waffle for a bit, just not really any point, and it's not going to add any value to the page. So you're better off filling in what you can and then sort of leaving it there.
Yeah, and then sort of, again, resources we've mentioned, just providing whatever resources you can that's going to help your reader, and local SEO again. So just if you're kind of writing a contact page for a local office, providing local resources that is applicable to that specific reader is great for SEO. Google really likes that. So yeah. Okay. So I just want to check that we have time, Maddie, because I know we've probably gone over slightly, but
should we move on to the AI section and then come back to the example for those who want to stay on a little bit longer?
Perfect. Yeah, good idea. So we thought that I suppose any kind of presentation or talk about content can't really be talked about without AI at the minute. And it's something that's, really interesting when it comes to trust, because it is essentially something that can really risk that. But it does have benefits. So we just wanted to kind of talk about it from both sides and kind of talk about how it can maybe help build trust, and then also the risks that you really kind of need to consider. So benefits of AI, obviously efficiency and consistency. So when we're talking about AI, we're not saying that it should be used for copywriting. We definitely don't want that. And as someone who's kind of built a profession in copywriting, that's quite a scary thing to see here. But it's just about how it can kind of assist. So, AI can be great for topic ideation, or helping you kind of use keywords in your content, or it can help you kind of adapt your own content to suit different audiences. So there's a couple of really good ways you can use it. Say, for example, you're working with a solicitor who sent you a kind of summary of a tribunal or something that's really complicated, and you need to make sure you're trying to create a blog post that is directed towards an audience who won't really have that kind of basic understanding. So AI is a really good way of saying, can you summarize this for me? Can you put this into bullet points? And then you can take that and then you create your blog. Or you can ask it to identify competitors' tone of voice. There's loads of different ways that you can use it that will essentially kind of help you in your goals to essentially building more trust, if that makes sense. And of course, efficiency and consistency. People like to see lots of content. So it's something that you can kind of consider in terms of how frequently you're going to be able to put the content out there.
It does. It can do a lot of the jobs that might take a long time for us to do. It can do it very quickly, and there's no denying that. That's completely true. So we talk about sort of AI in our daily roles, and although like we say, it's quite scary to think about what it could do to us as writers, we also appreciate that it's a tool essentially for us to use and to maximize the benefits from. So yeah, we do appreciate how beneficial it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think like when we're talking about risks, so obviously a huge risk of AI is a lack of transparency. And you just need to make sure that if you are utilizing AI to generate any ideas, or if you're using it to repurpose content, so it's not necessarily written by ChatGPT, but it's your content and you've, repurposed it, just being transparent with your audience, because it is something that risks that and therefore then kind of blurs the line of trust. It also has very limited knowledge. It now does have some knowledge post 2021, but it's still extremely limited. And as I'm sure if anyone has kind of tried using it, you'll find that it sometimes comes up with complete rubbish, basically. So you need to kind of really be working with it and fact checking. And this is kind of one of the reasons why I think it's just so important to talk about in the legal sector, because obviously we need that content to be accurate and relevant. And that's why you have to be so careful if you are considering using it.
And realistically, we know that some people would think to just generate the copy completely through ChatGPT, that's going to happen. When that tool is available to people, they'll use it. But it is the case that if you do that, you're still going to have to spend time, editing, formatting, thinking about how you can include your own specific tone of voice. So then it kind of does detract from that time and efficiency argument, because you still do need to take the time to change and adapt the content.
Yeah, and I think if you're talking about SEO and the importance of kind of putting unique content out on the internet, AI isn't going to do that for you because it's taking content that's already on the website. So you really need that human element and that human work to be able to create content that's going to be different from other people and other law firms.
We did have a question come through regarding copyright and AI content. So in theory, there shouldn't be an issue with copyright, because everything that ChatGPT, as an example, everything it generates should be unique. That's kind of the idea behind it. Because when it produces something, you can refresh it and it will rewrite it. So although it's trawling content from the internet, it reproduces it in a unique way. But the caveat to that is there is still a risk that you can't be 100% certain that it's not taken snippets from a site, and they'll be able to then trace that back. It's not foolproof, essentially. Although the theory behind it is sound, there's no absolute certainties. What you can be certain with is if you produce your own content that's unique, there's no way there will be any issues with it. So with copyright, I would approach it with trepidation, essentially.
Mm-hmm. I'll just quickly do the key takeaways if we have time, Maddie. And then I know people want to get going, so we can leave it there, and we can always send across some examples after anyway. But yeah, so just in terms of to sum everything up, so the first step to kind of really building trust is just to identify, understand, and connect with your audience. And to kind of to do that, attention to detail is key. Really don't let the small things slip. Pay attention to those kind of small things that you might not think are important, and everything else will kind of fall into place. Showing your experience, your expertise firsthand through case studies, proof of accreditations and awards. That's something that's really going to allow your audience to understand, why they should choose your services and trust you. Informative and insightful content over the drive to convert. You should really just have your audience's needs, at the forefront of everything you do. The CTAs and your kind of need to convert, that should come afterwards, because as long as you put the people first, then the business kind of goals will come after. Hitting those goals will come after. Consistency, making sure that everything you're doing is done as a long-term effort, because trust is built over time. And I thought one thing that just kind of sums it up nicely, which is just a quote that I quite like, which is, our job is not to create content, it's to change the lives of those who consume it. So yeah, just putting people first, and that is what will really build trust. And yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Georgia and Joe. I did write loads of notes, but actually your key takeaways have kind of summed up the whole presentation really nicely. For anyone who does have any questions or does want to watch the example that Georgia and Joe will run through, we'll carry on the recording and do that now, so we can stick around. But for anyone who does need to head off to another meeting or something else that they need to do this afternoon, thank you so much for joining us. We have recorded the session, so I will send this in a follow-up email later this week, and I'll also include the link to the Conscious Conversation for November on SEO again in that follow-up email too. So yeah, thank you so much to everyone for joining the session today. We really appreciate your time, and I know I've come away with lots of tips and tricks for writing content, so I hope you have as well. For anyone that does have any questions, we will, like I said, hang around for another 5 minutes. And if we don't have any further questions, we will go back and go through the example, so you can watch that back in the recording. So yeah, if there's anything, please put it in the chat or raise your hand. Whilst we're waiting for that, Georgia, do you want to go back a few slides? Oh, Laura, did you have a question? No? That's fine. Yeah, do you want to start going through the...
No, sorry. I didn't know how to turn on the hand.
No, that's fine. Don't worry. Yeah, so do you want to run through the example now then, Georgia and Joe? And for anyone that needs to head off, please feel free to do so.
Well, yeah, we'll only take a couple of minutes. It was just to kind of show you an example of how we would kind of optimize content, or how we would kind of look to change things to maybe increase that, to build more of a connection with, you know, our audience. So we'd got ChatGPT to write this, and it's just given us a very basic, you know, introduction, kind of first paragraph of content around divorce solicitors. And, you know, to be honest, this isn't the worst content in the world. It's just there's a lot of things that could be better. And I think, yeah.
There are some aspects of this which are good and sort of do actually tie in with some of the things we've discussed. So it does provide examples of expertise, and, you know, our team excels in negotiation and mediation. So that's like a specific example of expertise that, you know, you might be able to provide, which is good. But there are a lot of missing elements to this, which we would ideally build on, I think, is the sort of our initial thoughts about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, first of all, the main thing for me is that it's just far too long of a paragraph. I think we tend to, when we're writing for, you know, law firms, to keep that initial paragraph really short, with it, you know, maximum sort of 4 lines, and just breaking it up. You know, there's no harm in those first, you know, it split into 2 paragraphs, but just to make it a little bit more digestible, and just more accessible for the reader.
Yep. There isn't really any kind of aspects of storytelling. We would say doesn't really identify any kind of pain points, any issues that the reader might be experiencing. So therefore, you're kind of losing that ability to connect with them on a human level, because someone reading that initial sentence, "Our divorce solicitors are your trusted partners in navigating the challenging path of divorce." Well, that's not, you know, it's quite a basic sentence. That isn't necessarily something I think you would want to lead with, because it doesn't really provide any kind of human connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think just certain phrases that maybe stick out to me that is kind of AI, or just that it's really lacking that human element, is like the challenging path of divorce, and deep understanding. I think it just needs, it's really lacking that kind of human element. And I think if we can start that, you know, if you start off that introduction with tapping straight into a pain point that someone genuinely would have, and I think that again comes to understanding your audiences and really knowing what that pain point is, whether it's to do with, you know, wondering what's happening with your children, or your finances, actual pain points that people might be feeling, tapping into that, talking about that we kind of understand what's going on, and then kind of bringing in that our, you know, our services can help with this problem. And I think, again, it just needs to break down some terms. There's certain terms in there that I wouldn't include within the first paragraph. I think maybe even negotiation and mediation, I would probably wait till it's a little bit further down the page, offering a simple explanation of what those services actually are. And again, maybe even providing some proof of, you know, maybe accreditations or awards we've had, and putting that kind of right at the top of the page to, you know, make the reader kind of know right from the start that you're renowned for the services that you're trying to get them to kind of subscribe to. But yeah, I think, and apart from that, I think the general thing that I think we would want from this, if we were looking at it, is to adapt the tone of voice, and just, it would be completely dependent on what your values are as a business and what you offer your clients. But that is really what kind of elevate a paragraph of content like this into something that is really going to kind of be set apart from competitors on the internet.
Yeah, we sort of thought that this is the bare bones, basically, and this is what you could build from. And there's a lot of, you know, as we've discussed, a lot of ways you can add to it. But this is kind of like the skeleton of the kind of ideas we've been talking about. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we could go on for ages kind of picking through lots of content, but we won't do that. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening to us. I'll just quickly go to the end. Didn't know if there was any other questions anyone wanted to ask.
We've not had anything else in the chat. So yeah, I think we'll leave it there. And if anyone does have any follow-up questions, they can get in touch with you or Joe via LinkedIn, or send you an email. You can get your email addresses from the website. But yeah, thank you so much for all of your expertise and experience that you've shared with us today. It's been a really interesting and useful session, I think. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maddie.
I'm gonna stop the recording.